Okay, good afternoon. So today we are announcing a balanced package of freshwater reforms that is aimed at helping grow the economy while at the same time better caring for our rivers, lakes and aquifers. The government is committed to making the most of the economic growth opportunities that our water presents, while also ensuring we protect the environment. The package has four fundamental parts. First is a national policy statement under the Resource Management Act, which sets a consistent nationwide framework for setting water quality and quantity limits to govern the allocation of fresh water. Primarily, this is about ensuring that we have environmental bottom lines. Secondly, we're also announcing an Irrigation Acceleration Fund of $35 million over 5 years to support the development of irrigation infrastructure proposals and get them to an investment-ready stage. This is about unlocking the economic growth potential that New Zealand has from its abundant fresh water. The third part of the package is a freshwater clean-up fund. We accept that there are areas where New Zealand's freshwater has not been well managed and is beyond the resources of some councils to do the clean-up work. The government has already committed a large amount of resources to supporting the clean-up of the Waikato River and Lake Taupo, and this is about providing additional funding to address other problem areas. Finally, the government is also announcing a proposal for a $400 million equity irrigation investment scheme. This money is not included in Budget 2011, but is a proposed scheme to signal to the agricultural sector that the government is interested in being an equity partner in getting some of these very important irrigation schemes up and running. This reform package is the government's initial response to the Land and Water Forum report that was presented to Ministers of the Environment and Agriculture in April, and there is more to come. I want to now hand over to David Carter and Nick to say a few words. At the end of that, we'll take questions on this matter. When we've finished that, we'll just go back to the regular press conference for a Monday afternoon. So, David, in your hands.
Thank you, Prime Minister, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This package being announced today is the result of at least 2 years' work by my ministry and certainly is designed to expand on the government's economic growth agenda. Within the agricultural economy, I have identified that one of the most important things we can do is increase water storage and irrigation, and it is absolutely critical that we do that to the future growth of this part of our economy. In my opinion, New Zealand's greatest competitive advantage is in fact its water, and I often term it as our liquid gold. But to date, we have not done a good enough job in using this wonderful resource. The first stage of the package is the Irrigation Acceleration Fund of $35 million, and this will be to support the development of new irrigation infrastructure proposals so that they can be then presented to us as a government at an investment-ready prospectus stage. I am certainly aware, as I've travelled around New Zealand, of significant proposals, the Hawke's Bay, Wairarapa, Canterbury, Otago, to name but some. And the communities developing these schemes do need some assistance to get them so that they're professionally presented and ready for investors to seriously consider. The second announcement today, of course, and signalled by the Prime Minister, is that government will consider investing up to $400 million of equity into the construction of regional scale schemes. And this is as a means of showing to investors that whilst at this stage we are dealing with an immature investment class, government will be there as a corner shareholder. Funding for this Crown investment will now be finalised over the next few months, but it will not be available until, at the earliest, 2013-14. It is the intention for the Crown to be minority partners in these investments on commercial terms, and that will give confidence to other investors to come in to the same regional irrigation schemes. The exact nature and plan, the structure and nature of this plan is still to be confirmed, but it sends a very clear signal today that this government is serious about developing water storage schemes because they make good economic sense. An initial economic analysis by NZIER suggests that this fund could support the development of 340,000 hectares of new irrigation, boosting the New Zealand economy and exports by $1.4 billion in the next 7 years and by $4 billion by 2026. This will make a significant difference to the New Zealand economy. The final point I want to make is that in developing these schemes, I have worked very closely with Nick Smith as Minister of the Environment. I am very conscious that further irrigation does potentially lead to intensification of agriculture, and unless we do it right, can lead to environmental degradation. It is not in New Zealand's interest from a reputational point of view or from an environmentally sustainable point of view to do that. So in announcing the package today, it is a very complete package recognising the importance of irrigation infrastructure, but it being done in a way that takes full care of the environment. This is a very strong package, a very strong direction of a pathway for a future national government. Thank you. I'll hand to Nick.
Well, the package today on fresh water is about National delivering on its blue-green environment policy. It balances economic growth with environmental protection. It provides stronger central government direction. It builds on a collaborative approach of getting industry and environmentalists working together. A freshwater national policy statement has been talked about every year since the Resource Management Act was brought into force 20 years ago. It has not occurred previously because the diverse interests in water have been so polarised. Huge credit is due to the Land and Water Forum and its 58 representative groups for enabling us to make this progress today. We're now trying to translate this national collaboration to the local level, and we're very encouraged by the progress that's been made in North Canterbury, the Mackenzie country, around Lake Rotorua and the Manawatu, where very diverse water groups and councils are taking the lead from the forum and working together on local improvements in freshwater management. This national policy on freshwater will, from July 1st, impact on every decision made by any council or court on any consent, on any plan or rule affecting freshwater. It requires councils to set clear limits on water quality and on minimum flows. This NPS is the third under this government, following on from last year's NPS on coastal management and that I announced 2 months ago on renewable electricity. This compares to only one NPS being produced during the entire 1990s and one by the previous Labour government. 3 in this term reflects the way in which we're wanting to provide stronger national direction to make the Resource Management Act work. The new contestable freshwater clean-up fund will increase to 5-fold the amount this government is committing to clean-ups like those on Lake Taupo, the Rotorua Lakes and the Waikato River. An important precondition to the government providing any funding is that those councils and communities have the right sort of firm rules in place that will prevent ongoing pollution. This is the government using both a carrot and a stick to improve freshwater management. The stick is the national policy requiring rules be put in place, while at the same time providing a carrot in the form of funding for councils who do improve their freshwater management and performance. The total investment the government will now be committing with the additional money in Budget 2011 is $264 million for water cleanups and represents a very substantial investment by government in New Zealand's clean green environmental brain. Thank you. Any questions?
Why is the policy not going to be fully implemented, the NPS, until 2030?
Yeah, the Board of Inquiry that was responsible for the key legal process for finalising the NPS received a very wide range of submissions. And the real challenge with water quality is there are such long timeframes. For instance, if you take Lake Taupo, from the time when you add nutrients in the catchment to the point where it actually impacts on water quality, or for that matter not introduce nutrients, can be timeframes as long as 25 or 30 years. So yes, 2030 is a long time. This is about being realistic, about fixing water quality is going to take a long time, just in the same way as it's taken a very long time for many of these water bodies to become substantially polluted.
And does this mean that, for instance, a dairy farmer or a sheep farmer switches to dairy and becomes more intensely using the land? Does that mean they will have to require resource consent?
No, it doesn't. What this national policy statement requires is that each of our regional councils develops the detailed rules to be able to set limits on water quality and to set limits on those minimum flows that there should be in our streams and in our rivers. Now, in some areas already, a resource consent is required for significant intensification. It'll be for each regional council to decide on the response. There's now a big job for the government to work with organisations like the Land and Water Forum and regional councils on the practical implementation of this national policy statement.
Have you really believed that $400 million investment in irrigation was going to get you $1.4 billion a year? Why would we do it now?
Well, the schemes aren't ready to go. That's one thing that I've noticed as I've studied the various schemes. A lot of them aren't in an investment ready stage yet. We want to therefore put the money initially into the Irrigation Acceleration Fund, assist the communities and the regions develop their schemes. I anticipate that will take a couple of years before any of those proposals are brought to a stage when we can go out to investment. But the returns, we believe, were certainly there, and they're substantial for New Zealand agriculture by providing reliability of irrigation to a large area of New Zealand now that only with reliable water could be irrigated.
Surely the thinking is that the money isn't there either. I mean, you don't have $400 million to do it.
We've certainly positioned ourselves with a very tough budget at this particular stage, and we've acknowledged that. This is not about this budget. It is certainly a signal to the communities and the regions developing schemes that they have got the support of this government in the future when they need it.
And just checking on that 35 million, is that all spending that's already earmarked for irrigation planning?
No, that is funding that is new funding. It's reprioritised money in this budget. There has been a community irrigation fund up until now that has been utilised and depleted. So we're replacing that with something that's bigger, and it's very much about accelerating the projects that we know can be developed reasonably quickly.
And where's that 35 million coming from?
It's a MAF budget appropriation.
The acceleration funds, would a council have to be in equity, have equity within the scheme itself to access it?
No, not necessarily at all. That'll be available to communities, to regions, to councils. As they decide to develop a scheme, it'll be money made available to do the pre-feasibility work, the feasibility work, and get it to a stage when they can actually put it out for successful perspectives to other investors. At that stage, the government has the option of being a cornerstone shareholder.
And do you have a idea of what a minimum government shareholding would be? Would it be a third?
We haven't set any. We've still got a lot of work to do around that detail, but a quarter to a third perhaps. I don't see it being more than that. It's not if the scheme won't stack for other investors to being involved, then there's a good reason why government should look at it again. These investments tend to be immature investments in that the investment community hasn't had experience of irrigation infrastructure investment before. We believe by standing alongside them, being prepared to be there as a corner shareholder, we can encourage other investors to come on side.
But there could be a lot of foreign investment in what would be strategic regional assets.
We've been talking at a very high level to banks, to iwi. There's quite a lot of interest from the investment community already in the potential for these schemes as an investment.
New Zealand investment, you mean?
And farmers themselves.
Regional councils already have, big problems managing water, Canterbury being one example. What confidence do you have that they're going to be able to develop rules in the face of competing interests?
Yeah, well, if Environment Canterbury was very frustrating in that after 19 years of the RMA, they still did not have an operative plan. That is why the government put a took a pretty big call last year to intervene there. I'm hugely encouraged by the progress that the commissioners have made. I'm due to make an announcement in the next few weeks on the progress that they have made in getting a good set of regional rules in place for the water resource in Canterbury. For other regions, I have to tell you, everywhere I go, the message I get is when is the government going to provide regional councils with some clear directions around its expectations of water policy? And that's why we've delivered this national policy statement today.
Do you not think it needs driving from a central government point of view? You know, there have been a lot of arguments about consistency and rules applied here and elsewhere and that sort of thing. Don't you think this sort of defaults responsibility back to the council, saying, well, you do the rules and you implement them?
Yeah, well, the regional councils still have their responsibilities under the Resource Management Act. What we're trying to do is to provide a consistent framework. And I think there is a very strong consensus across all those 58 very diverse groups, fish and game, forest and bird, federated farmers, right across the board. There was a consensus that the government urgently needed to provide some national policy, and that's what we've delivered.
So people that are very worried about intensive dairy farming and land being used and obviously the environmental impact, can you say to them that this would maybe discourage or manage or address some of those concerns that people have in those areas?
Well, this package is deliberately designed to be balanced. The government's very clear agenda is to take up the economic opportunities that my colleague David Carter has spoken of, but equally we're clear about setting some environmental bottom lines. So the assurance we want to give to New Zealanders is that we can get the economic growth potential from our freshwater resource, but at the same time make sure that we not only protect our lakes, rivers and aquifers, but actually we improve them, and that's what this package will deliver.
So can you say that water quality is going to be improved under this package?
Yes, absolutely.
Even when you're saying that economic performance, i.e. take that as expansion of dairy in some areas?
Yeah, well, I'd give you a really good example and invite you to have a look, and David's been very involved with the Opua scheme down in Canterbury. And that's a really good example of a storage scheme that if you talk to fish and game, if you talk to forest and bird, if you look at the data around water quality, we have been able to have our cake and eat it too. That is, you've got huge investment, new jobs, growth exports, better minimum flows in the rivers and better water quality. And that's exactly what we're wanting to replicate on a national level.
Does the government have a view on who owns water and how you're going to address that with the EU?
Yeah, the first thing is, I think an argument in the government's point of view about who owns the water is about as sensible as arguing who owns the air. The reality of the water cycle is that the water evaporates out of the ocean, it goes into clouds, it rains, it goes down rivers, and any one person owns a particular litre or cubic metre of water is a bit of a nonsense. Where we have said that we want to have a dialogue, and we've actually had very constructive ongoing discussion at both Prime Ministerial and Ministerial level with the iwi leaders group, is about rights and interests in water. There is specific provisions in the national policy statement that there's been consultation with those iwi leaders about to say that yes, they do have quite a special right to be able to have a say in the way in which water is managed, but we are not going into the area of claiming that any particular group of New Zealanders own water.
Does the fact that you're devolving rulemaking that the regional councils mean that the government has decided against the establishment of a land and water commission as suggested by the...
No, it hasn't. And I really want to emphasise there were 53 recommendations in the report that was presented to the Land and Water Forum, to myself and David Carter last month. There's a whole range of recommendations, including a Land and Water Forum Commission and many other changes. For instance, changes in the way in which our regional councils are elected and operate. Now, that's a really complicated reform. The government has set out in the announcements today the work program over the next 18 months to work through those recommendations. The government is neither committing for them or against them. It's just simply saying that's a really big, important issue that we need more time to work through, and frankly there would need to be further public consultation on some of those other proposals from the Land and Water Forum.
Does this EPS provide scope for...
You'll need to have the allocation mechanism sort of going even near a $100 million fund.
The program that you'll see, Patrick, in the analysis that we've announced, is that we want to have the further measures around water quality worked through with decisions by Cabinet in February of next year, and the key decisions around the allocation by October next year is the work program moving forward on this. And we're quite upfront. This is the first step in the government's water reforms. It's not the final say. Big issues like allocation is on the ongoing work program.
Does the NPS provide scope for charging for water permits?
Sorry?
Does it provide scope for charging for water points?
No more or less than what there is right now. That is, no, there is nothing specifically in the NPS. There is an overriding objective, and that is that fresh water is used in its most economic purpose. That is, we should be about the objective of maximising wealth, but there's nothing in the NPS that makes it either more likely or less likely that regional councils will impose charges for the use of water within their regions.
So council's still free to if it chose to.
Correct, and some do and some don't.
Okay, so why, on the issue of resource consents, the draft policy allowed for a call for resource consents for intensification. So why have you
Yeah.
objected that?
Yeah, the legal advice that I received was that the Board of Inquiry's report went beyond what a national policy statement could legally do. That is, if you look at the framework of the RMA, it's about setting a high-level policy, not detailed rules. And I was advised both by the Ministry and it was also the advice of MAF that if we impose an NPS of that sort, we run risk of legal challenge because it is the job of councils to set the rules, it's the job of government through an NPS to set the policy.
But would you expect individual councils to start doing it individually? Would you, I mean, can farmers expect that in the future they will have to think about, in some areas, applying for a consent to intensify the use of their land?
There are councils where that incurs now already, and as a consequence, as councils now work through this new policy, where they have to set limits, there will be catchments. And I'll give you an example. If you take the Rotorua catchment, where there are real problems with the amount of nitrogen and phosphorus that's entering into that lake system, it is my expectation that the council will ultimately get to a point that if you're doing significant intensification that's going to add nutrients to the water system, that you will require resource consent.
But do you expect more councils to start doing this because of this NPS?
I expect, as a consequence of the rules and the limits that are set, not just for farmers but for others, there will be tighter rules around adding nutrients or other pollutants into our river systems.
If you wanted that as a national sort of policy approach, couldn't you just amend the Resource Management Act?
You could, but I'm not sure that's the right approach, and that's not where the government has gone. In our view, and where the consensus of the Land and Water Forum was the sensible first step was to get this national policy statement in place, and that's what we've done.
Why wouldn't you take that approach? I mean, set a threshold for...
I tell you the real
activity.
difficulty, and I think the part that you're missing, is that there are huge differences in different parts of New Zealand about the challenge of the water challenge. You've got a real fragile volcanic environment like Rotorua. The limits and the rules that are required are frankly a lot tighter than they would need to be, for instance, in a community like the West Coast, where they've got gyudals of water, which means the level of the degree to which the pollutants are mixed up with large volumes of water makes it not such a problem. I'm not sure where
It's a good word. Yeah, it's a good word. It's a gyudals. It's like one I would have made
Quite a
up.
lot.
But anyway,
Quite a lot is what I'll say.
Yeah.
Well, a couple of questions to Mr. Carter. What's happening with gyudals? The 35 million accelerating fund, does that translate into a government shareholding, or is that just a...
No, it doesn't. That is a straight grant to assist the promoters of a scheme get it to a stage when it can be feasibly looked at by investors and look attractive enough for investment.
Why wouldn't you just sort of treat it as some sort of, vendor consideration with setting up a company? I mean, why not just take a shareholding stake in it rather than just provide it as a complete subsidy? If it's a commercial entity.
Yeah, what government wants at this stage is to assist the promoters of schemes, get them to a investment ready stage. I've been aware of some schemes that have been promoted in a relatively unprofessional way, and simply because often it's a group of farmers who simply don't have the skills to do it. These people need assistance if they're going to maximise the best opportunity of any scheme, and that's what the Acceleration Fund is about.
But if it turns into a commercial venture, why should the taxpayer expect to get some of that investment back?
We could think about doing that, but at this stage I want those who are promoting schemes to make access of the Acceleration Fund, where I'm championing the fact that we need to get irrigation schemes delivered to give that economic benefit. My own area of Canterbury, they've been talking about water storage and reliable irrigation for well over 100 years.
You're basically giving the rural community $35 million to invest in irrigation, and they can keep any profits there.
To invest in the development of the irrigation schemes. These schemes will require a lot more capital than that. They then have the opportunity to come back to government, and government will look at each individual project, and provided government is happy that it stacks up financially and environmentally, government can make the decision to invest as a cornerstone shareholder.
There aren't too many areas of business though where the government basically fund a feasibility study, are there? Isn't that people money?
There has previously been a community irrigation fund, a far smaller fund that has been doing this work. This is in fact an enhanced community irrigation fund, but very much now with a new name. We want to give the signal to those people considering the potential of irrigation in their areas. We want to see the schemes accelerated.
If no one owns the water, what will the government do to ensure that the public's right to the stored water is protected as well?
I don't believe any of these schemes have an easy ride through a resource consent process unless they've taken the community with them. That's one thing that we've seen very clearly in Canterbury with the development of the water management strategy. These schemes won't occur if they're simply pushed by farmers and who may then choose to ignore some of the genuine interests of other stakeholders. So what we're seeing now developing with the Greater Regional, Wellington Regional Council and the Wairarapa, what we're seeing in the Hawke's Bay, what we're certainly seeing in Canterbury, is that the schemes that are making the most progress are the schemes whereby all the stakeholders have sat round together, recognised each other's genuine interest in developing irrigation, and it's not just about irrigation for irrigation's sake. You have to respect the recreational users, the fishers, etc.
Mr. Key, when you guys got into government, you took immense pleasure of attacking Labor for announcing grandiose plans of announcing projects without having funding for them. How is this different from that, the 400 million?
Well, the $35 million is to put those schemes...
400 million.
Well, yeah, but the $35 million is to put those schemes in a position whether they can come with the feasibility study done and be ready to invest in. There's no question when they're at that point, in my view, the $400 million will ultimately be invested in those schemes because the economic payback for New Zealand is enormous. And we have a massive untapped resource. Most of it gets washed out to sea. If we want to lift our performance economically, if we want to create more jobs and we want to make New Zealand a wealthier country, we'll attract more of that resource and irrigate our land. And we need to do that in a way which is environmentally sensitive and sustainable.
So that 400 million will be there?
That's my view.
Will it be there in budget forecast?
Look, I don't think it sits there in the forecast, but we would anticipate it's starting in budget 13-14. It's over a period of time. We'll build it into capital budgets at that point. Okay, thanks very much.